Hello everyone and welcome back to the MyFootballWriter YouTube channel, and welcome back to a little bit of transfer talk. Even though the summer window is still 2 months away and the January window is well and truly shut, there has been a bit of news emerge ever since Norwich City's loss to Plymouth Argyle at Home Park on Saturday afternoon. And it looks as if Norwich City are going to exercise their option to buy in the loan deal of Jacob Wright, the Manchester City youth team defensive midfielder, who's had a handful of games at Norwich City and has looked to try and break his way into Norwich City's team and earn himself valuable game time and experience in England's second tier. But this video really just to give you a bit more detail about what the deal will be like, how much it will cost, and what we already know about Jacob Wright, and maybe what he can bring to this team and the Johannes Hoff Thorup project over the course of the rest of this season and pre-season and the season to come up. So first things first, as already stated, 19 years old, an England youth international, has made 6 appearances for the Three Lions at an under-21s level, has mainly played his football with Manchester City's under-23 side, where he's played a lot of games in the UEFA Youth League, has played in the Premier League 2 quite consistently with Manchester City. He's also made first-team appearances at the Citizens, has played in the Champions League and the Premier League, albeit very brief introductions off the substitutes bench, but a player with sort of experience beyond his years at the moment, at least in youth football, has played a lot of it, and it is quite an intriguing game, youth football. There's, of course, everyone plays for their sides because they're extremely talented and they have got to where they are due to hard work and dedication and really good coaching. But when you then bring them into senior sides and you look at how they portray themselves and how they play in games, and do they use their teachings from youth coaches, and perhaps he can use what he's learned from Guardiola, not exactly a bad person to learn what you should be doing in a football match. But at Norwich City, it's been his first real test of a very short career so far in the professional game, and sort of coming into the team, as I said, that's his first real taste of what it's like in a senior level when you come up against a lot older players than you who have got a bit more nous. They're a lot more experienced than you, and they've played the game at a decent level for a number of years. So they pick up different things from other coaches, and even just sort of probably watching back their own performances and learning about how they play. So no, as to sort of sum up a very sort of long-winded point, 19 years old, England youth international, a lot of potential behind the transfer and the player. So why not? Why not take the punt when he's coming from Manchester City, who are by far, arguably by far the best team in the country. So on to the next point. Defensive midfielder, right-footed player. We know that Johannes Hoff Thorup has loved a left footer ever since he joined Norwich City. I think they've only signed either 2 or 3 of their signings across both windows were right footers. So just a little bit more balance, perhaps, if Norwich are to play a midfield double pivot rather than a midfield trio, and you can have one left footer and one right footer, as that's a very important aspect to have all over the pitch in modern football. But a defensive midfielder, that's a position Norwich still haven't really replaced Alexander Tete with, and he retired from professional football 3 years ago and left Norwich 4 years ago. So that says just about as much as you need to know how much really Norwich need a player in this position. And albeit, again, a lot like so many of their signings this season, it is one for the future. It is one that is going to take quite a bit of time for Norwich fans and their coaching staff to really see how Jacob Wright integrates into this team, and can he learn it quickly as to what he needs to do and where he needs to be on the pitch and react to certain scenarios in different football matches against 23 sides who are all going to play differently to one another. It's going to be very intriguing to see if this is to become a permanent signing, and even over the rest of the season, if he is to play and start quite a bit more than he already has at Norwich City, just to see exactly that. How is he going to communicate with his teammates? How is he going to get into the team and cement his place and cement the fact that he can be a Norwich City player next season? He, as already mentioned, has barely played first team football at a senior level, and especially in the Championship, which is such a physically demanding league and really can be as fast and can be very fast paced at times. So ultimately, a brilliant defensive midfielder. Norwich have desperately needed that, and hopefully he can be the man, but that may take a bit of time. And as we already know, he's already on loan at Norwich City. 9 appearances is all he's made since he signed on January deadline day. Of course, there has been quite a few more games than that since the end of the first month of the year, and now we're almost halfway through April. So he's been in and around the first team picture, but majority of them have been substitute appearances. The only start I can think of off the top of my head was against Preston North End, and he wasn't even meant to start that game. He was meant to be on the bench. Kenny McLean was going to start, but due to illness, Kenny McLean ended up not playing. Jacob Wright came in, and Norwich did lose that game. But even when they lost at the weekend against Plymouth Argyle, he was substituted on at half-time to change things up. Norwich needed really a player of his positional knowledge, someone who could come into the game and just slow things down, just break up play. And if Plymouth were to sprint forward through the midfield areas, he was just in the right place to get a foot in or do a tactical foul and halt an attack. So you can tell that even from that alone, bringing him on at half time and Thorup identifying the issue, to have a player like that straight away to think, right, you are perfect, I will bring you on, you can do this because it's your position. So no, he's, albeit not been heavily involved as a Norwich City player since he joined in January. We could see now that Norwich's season is effectively over. They're 7 points off the playoffs, if not more now, with 6 games to go. So for his own personal development and for the sake of getting valuable minutes and really to cement the future transfer of himself, then this is big for him. But only 9 appearances, it's not bad at all. Norwich have wanted to use him in games and have him around the first team and senior players that he can learn off and even be around next season if it is to become permanent. So no, albeit that it may be a bit concerning at first, there's still, he's still a player who is very much learning this style of play because it's the first time he's been outside of his own football club in Manchester City. But on to the actual transfer itself, and this is perhaps a lot less than maybe what a lot of Norwich fans would have thought. It's, well, I say that, but it was reported when he signed on loan. £2.3 million plus add-ons is the believed fee for Norwich if they were to make this a permanent deal and use that option to buy. It isn't an obligation, so they don't have to sign Jacob Wright regardless of what happens over the course of the season. It very much is down to them and the management staff and of course the sporting director and Ben Napper and the higher ups and the player himself in Jacob Wright and Manchester City. But if they weren't happy to sell him for that amount of money, they wouldn't have put it in and agreed it. So quite a cheap fee, you would say, for a player who has made quite a few appearances at youth level for England. He's been involved in the Manchester City first team, albeit, again, as I said earlier, just short cameos off the bench in the Premier League and the Champions League. But to be at Manchester City's academy, you've got to be a very good footballer. So Norwich, you could argue they're getting that. £2.3 million. It's worth it, in my opinion. In football, every transfer is a gamble, regardless of how much you spend. But for that sum of money, as stated, an England youth international, in the Manchester City Academy, clearly has got a lot of hype around him. Why not? For that sort of money, if the coach wants him and the player wants to stay at the football club, which we'll get on to, why not? £2.3 million could end up being a steal, or it could end up that Norwich or maybe Manchester City sort of was pulling wool over their eyes. But we'll wait and see on that. The deal may not even happen. But the last point is what was said in his post-match little interview he did for the club channels and BBC Radio Norfolk, and that was also stated in the Pink 'Un as well. He wants to join Norwich City Football Club. He stated, well, his exact words when asked, "Do you want to join Norwich?" was, "Yes, 100%. I want to stay a Norwich player," which is incredible in an age really where you have a lot of media trained players and you get the same sort of answers from all of them. It sounds a bit robotic, which maybe this is. Maybe he doesn't want to say, "Oh no, I've not enjoyed my time here," because if he did, then he'd have a falling out. But to hear that he wants to join the football club after what really, as we've already said, only 9 appearances on loan, it's not exactly been a fruitful loan spell. Norwich haven't done much in the league either. They're in the middle of the table, but clearly he sees the bigger picture, and he's been told by Thorup that he would love him to be a big part of it, and how he can sort of play his way into the team and what his role will be. And Thorup himself has even said in the post-match press conference after Plymouth, and even his pre-match one today, the day I'm recording it, before Norwich City play Sunderland on Tuesday night on the 8th of April, he said as well, "I want the player. The player wants to play for the coach, and the coach wants the player." So it makes perfect sense for Norwich to sign Jacob Wright, because all parties that are directly involved with the deal, player and the first team manager of the team he's on loan at, they want it to happen. So it looks as if this is most likely going to happen. And I think, especially after really his impressive cameo against Plymouth Argyle, that a lot of Norwich fans took note of and were very impressed by. They can see that there is a player there, and ultimately the management staff can as well. They wouldn't have brought him in on loan, let alone thought of signing him on a permanent deal for just over £2 million. So it does look as if Jacob Wright will be staying in a yellow and green shirt next season. What do you think of that? Do you think Norwich shouldn't exercise their option to buy? Do you think Jacob Wright is pulling the wool over Johannes Hoff Thorup's eyes and getting all this positive talk about him, and then he ends up thinking, well, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe I won't join Norwich and stay here. But let me know your thoughts on the potential permanent signing of Jacob Wright. Maybe what have you thought of him on loan so far at Norwich in the 9 games he's played? I'd love to hear your thoughts and be able to discuss them with you in the comments section. But this is all we've got time for on this episode of a bit of transfer talk on the MyFootballWriter YouTube channel. It's goodbye for now, and we'll see you for the next video of ours.